Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, having a conversation with Thomas Caldwell. He, of course, is chairman of Caldwell Securities Ltd. In Toronto. Tom, you alluded to this, how the Canadian situation with the U.S. is very different from the Mexican situation with the U.S. And there have been some calls, including Premier Doug Ford of Ontario, that perhaps we should uh, have a bilateral conversation with the U.S. rather than these trilateral meetings under USMCA. Any comments or thoughts on that?
I think the Mexicans were a little bit annoyed that our first reaction to Trump's proposed measures, was to throw the Mexicans under the bus.
Right,
And,
right.
we're all into this together. Oh, no, we're not. And so I can understand they're being a little bit upset with Canada, the Mexicans as well. Um, Clearly, we are not as offensive in either the illegal immigration or the drug business as Mexico is. I mean, clearly, we have slippage across the border into the U.S. The big stories in Canada have been people freezing to death coming to Canada from the U.S. But I don't think anyone in Canada really was cognizant of the fact that this is a big issue in the Americans' mind. And maybe it's not. Sometimes incidents are used to do what you want to do anyway. Trump wants to show himself as tough, and tough on Mexico and in Canada. I think it's a little bit of payback and want to get even with Trudeau. But we're nowhere in the same snack bracket as the Mexicans are. And I think we'll be able to cut something out. We should be able to cut a deal with them. At least normal people could. I just don't know whether Trudeau's the guy to do it. I just don't
Gotcha.
know that. I hope he can do it for the sake of Canada. But that's my hope.
Yeah, and we do have some things on our side. The number I keep hearing is 60% of America's oil and gas comes from Canada. So do you want to hike up the price of gasoline at the pump for Americans with these 25% tariffs? And of course, we've got a number of U.S. states where their primary trading partner is Canada, not Mexico. So we do have some things that we need to talk to the Americans about, correct?
I would think so. We do have some leverage, but I remember Don Regan, who was White House Chief of Staff under Ronald Reagan, said to me when I worked for Merrill Lynch, "Never get into a stamping fight with an elephant." And we can't go tit for tat. I mean,
Right.
Trump is the kind. He's transactional. You can do a deal with him. I mean, he's a guy. For example, the three people that run the world. There's Trump, there's Putin, and Premier Xi, and these guys all have a regard, if not a respect, but I think also respect for each other, and they can get on the phone and cut deals. Um, uh, Canada is seen as a sideshow. We don't participate in defense. We don't participate in things that they see as important. Therefore, we don't have leverage.
And it's coming home to roost for sure. Yeah, I guess this is our last show before the break, before Christmas and into the new year. What do you think 2025 holds for Canada?
I keep telling our young people in our office that I'm an optimist. And the reason I'm an optimist is optimists tend to be richer than pessimists. So I have decided to go on that side of the equation.
Yeah,
Um, I've said on this program before, I've been very positive throughout all this year, and it's been a good year for markets and investors. And we all think we're smart again. I do think next year will also be a good year in the U.S. If President Trump can do even 20% of what he's committed to do for the economy, deregulation, getting on top of I think that will be a good year for the U.S. market. Now, it could be the first part of the year might be a little bit negative because we've all had such a good year. None of us want to take any more capital gains this year. And in Canada, we don't even know what the tax regime is going to be anymore.
no.
But so I think if I'm going to do any selling of stuff, I'm going to push it into January to delay the taxes I have to pay on for another year. So we might see an early dip at the beginning of the year. Uh, but after that, I think it's going to be a pretty good year for equity markets and indeed for the U.S. economy. Because what is happening, it isn't about Trump. We tend to think that there's a revolution in thinking, less government, more freedom, less taxes, balance the budget. It's a reversion to what was successful in the past.
Right.
So I'm positive.
Yeah, and so that's washing over from U.S. to Canada then.
I hope so. People get the governments they deserve. That's a scary thought. And, we didn't realize what some Canadians, it took us 9 years to realize that we had a gentleman on us who was not competent. He was foisted on us by the Liberal Party. I think now it's going forward from here that we have to look at. And I hope some of it does wash over.
Tom, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be back at you after these messages.